Messianic Arian Radio. Only one God.
Hello and welcome. This is Eliseo Rodriguez, and this is the Arian Orthodox Church. Hope you're having a really good day. This morning I've got a couple of questions, again from Paisley Yama on our YouTube channel. And she says, thank you for the video answers. I have more questions. Number one question, she says, what is Arianism? I mean, is it a denomination or a church that has a specific set of doctrines like Lutheranism, or is it a concept like the Trinity that can and is embraced by a number of different churches and denominations, but is not a denomination in and of itself? So Arianism is a belief system. It is an understanding, let me put it this way, an understanding of the truth that's gleaned from the Bible, giving us explanations about the character of Christ. So any church can accept Arianism and the truth of Arianism, and you don't have to actually be an Arian church. So, whatever you call yourself, that's fine. Arianism is a belief system, understanding who Christ is, although there are creeds that have to come with that. There has belief systems that have to come with it, not necessarily creeds. Creeds are post-biblical or not out. They're outside of the Bible. As long as you use the Bible as your belief system, and you're taking all of the words literally, and you're taking understanding the truth of God and His Son, then what you believe is Arianism. So actually, Arianism is a belief system of who Christ and who God is. You can be in any church you want to and be an Arian and believe Arianism. So it's more like the doctrine of the Trinity in that churches believe, or people believe and teach this understanding, which is called Arianism. That's what Arianism is. It's not necessarily a denomination. Although, when you think about it, people will exclude you from their group if you believe this way. So Arianism can be also understood as an isolated group, not necessarily one that's a denomination today, although we're trying to obviously grow in numbers and get leadership and get Bible studies going like this and regular associations on Facebook, and hopefully someday we'll have house churches and pastors and leadership that are more established and cohesive, and obviously we want to stay together. We want to fellowship together, but it's not necessarily an exclusive thing to us. It is the truth of God. And so the truth of God is not owned by any church. It's not owned by any person. It's not my doctrine. It's not Arius' doctrine. It's the church. It's the truth of God. It's the truth of His Son. And so because of that, it has no boundaries. It has no limitations. The truth has no limitations. It's not owned by an association or a group. And that's kind of the problem with having a denomination, is that it can become corrupted. And then it would make the beliefs of Arianism look like it's associated with the denomination that could be corrupt or become corrupt. So the understanding of Arianism is a truth, and it's outside the realm of being owned by a denomination. It is owned by no denomination. I am not the leader of Arianism. I am not the head or anything. It's a concept. It's the truth. and it transcends ownership by anyone. It was originally, the original church understood this, and that church decided to reject it at 300 in AD or 325, and later on adopting the Trinity in 381. So, the original church, what the Catholic Church believes is them now, was Arian. So every church stems from the origination of the Arian church. Every other church, including the Catholic Church, has come out of the true Arian church. But Arianism itself is a belief, is a truth. And it's not limited. You can believe this truth and sit in a Catholic church. And you may not agree with what they say, but believe what you believe. And I believe that that's how Arians have existed for so long, is being in churches where people are teaching the Trinity, and you don't accept that, but you accept whatever else truth that comes from them. Because just like the Jews and the disciples were Messianic Christians or Messianic Jews in the temple. And they went to the temple to pray, and they went to the synagogues to pray, and their belief system is what changed, what made them be an excluded group. But they still tried to go to the Jewish temple and try to teach Messianic Judaism to them, and they were excluded. So they were brought together and persecuted. And so that's the same thing with Arianism. Arianism is a belief system, but it will exclude you. It'll cause you to be excluded from others as you talk about it, and then it on its own will become its own church, denomination, group, organization. And obviously every organization is going to have headship and all other stuff. But it's because as we start teaching our truth and our understanding, we'll become more excluded, and the only people that we can find to cohabitate together will eventually be people of like-mindedness, and out of that will always grow some kind of organization. But the truth itself is greater than that. Second question. When do you believe it was first taught that Jesus is God? What do you believe taught that, and why? So I believe that they taught that Jesus is a God. Let me just change that a little bit. You're asking, when did they start believing that Jesus is God himself? I think that started in 325, 319, when Arius started complaining about these people. The very first time that I've ever seen it in the early church fathers is with Ignatius. Ignatius says some people were trying to call the Son uncreated, which is part of the Nicene Creed, or actually part of the Athanasian Creed. And so Ignatius, who is a direct disciple of John, was complaining about people who are calling the Son uncreated. And so he was already dealing with people trying to elevate God the Son beyond just being the Son of God and being actually God Almighty. The understanding from Jews is that Jesus is the messenger of the Lord, is the memra, is the word of the Lord, is the messenger of the Lord. Whenever you see that a messenger of the Lord appears to Moses or Joshua or anyone, and they realize that all of a sudden they're talking to the Lord, to Yahweh, it's actually Jesus. And this being the messenger of the Lord, which in the King James versions will say the angel of the Lord, but that's not the meaning of the word. It's actually messenger. It's supposed to be messenger there. So Jesus is a messenger of God, although he's not an angel. As you remember, I pointed that out. So the messenger of the Lord is Jesus coming out and doing all of these things. So back then, the messenger of the Lord, Jesus, would say things like, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so the understanding was that he is God as a representative of God, somehow being called God. And so because of that, obviously a lesser being, but he's a representative of God. So the idea that Jesus being a God or a representative of God has been around even in Judaism, except they didn't put the name Jesus on there in the persona, the man who became born through Mary. They didn't associate those two because frankly, he wasn't even born then. They only knew him as the messenger of the Lord. So then when you come to the New Testament and Jesus is born and they understand all of these things, the disciples had a learning curve. They had to learn exactly what Jesus was saying. Peter saying, you're the Holy One, the Son of Jesus. I mean, the Son of the Father, the Holy One of God, the Son of God. He's understanding. They're barely getting revelation about who Jesus is as the Son of God. And they're trying to get their bearings about them, about totally understanding. And then after Jesus resurrects and he's walking with some on the road to Emmaus, he starts expounding to them more of the revelation. After they get the Holy Spirit, he starts expounding more on the revelation that in the Psalms and in the Torah, all of the things they're talking about Jesus. He opens their eyes to see where Jesus is in the Old Testament. And so this teaching about Jesus being in the Old Testament is crucial, because then you understand who they understand Jesus to be now. I mean, Thomas said, "My Lord and my God." He called Jesus God. John called Jesus a God. So that whole notion of Jesus being a God, not being the Most High God though, but being a God, is in the very beginnings of the church and comes from the apostles, but is not when this Trinitarian thing where they say that Jesus and the Son are one God together, meaning that one Elohim, that one God is a tripersonal being. That whole thing started in 319, was getting stronger in 319, 325, and that's why Arius got up and just rebuked Alexander of Alexandria, because he was the bishop and he was adopting this heresy. And so that's where it really took hold. But it really, like I'm saying, I see it with Ignatius, who was a direct disciple, was a student of John the Apostle, and we see the idea. So that idea of elevating Jesus to being the uncreated is seen right at the beginning. And you have to think about Adam and Eve, and how Adam and Eve, as soon as they came into the garden, and as soon as God has established all of these things, the devil wants to come in and right away distort and swoop in and just destroy everything before it can even start going. So he wants to nip it in the bud before everything starts going and it gets out of hand. The devil knows that if you want to stop something, you stop it at its inception, before it starts growing, and that way you'll kill it ultimately. If it can't grow, it's just going to die. Is his attempt at everything. Start it when it's small, before it gets bigger. And so right at the beginning with Ignatius, you see people trying to elevate the Son to being the uncreated, or being uncreated and always existing. And so I think it's the notion, or the deception, or the delusion started right away. As soon as it could have started, that's when it started. There's nothing new under the sun. So that doctrine of the Trinity, that even in its infantile form, had to have been out there at the beginning. And so I think it's been around. The doctrine of the Trinity idea has been around for a long time, but it's always been announced by the church. And it was accepted finally in 319, which is why there was such a big deal happen, with the council and all that, and the wars between the churches, or the groups of churches, groups of people. So 3 says, do you think Trinitarians and Arians basically believe the same things? Is it just a matter of nuance that is the difference? I mean, Trinitarians believe 3 distinct beings in one nature. The difference is they will call Jesus as God, while Arians will not call Jesus as God. So is that the only difference? In my opinion, Trinitarianism and Arianism, very similar. I've only got, actually I'll make another video on this